So in my last video, if you missed it, I actually went through and confirmed that the Haswell-based Dell Optiplex systems, the one I was using by the way was a Dell Optiplex 9020, could in fact be put over into a new case, that is be recased completely and avoid all error messages. And the way I was doing that was basically using the exact same process that TechYesCity detailed in one of his recent videos, and I'll link that down below, as well as all the parts I'm going to talk about here today, getting this thing up and running. And if I'm being completely honest, this system was actually really easy to put together, and I'm using a new case that I've never actually used before, but it is from a manufacturer that I have taken a look at before, and that is Musatex. And this particular case is a micro ATX case. It's a little bit smaller than some of their older micro ATX chassis, but what really sort of attracted me about this case was a few of the different features. First and foremost is this mesh front, which I actually assumed would be a plastic mesh front when I ordered this case. It's actually metal, and with this nice open front mesh, you also get two RGB fans, which do connect into a built-in fan controller, so you don't actually need a motherboard header to run these fans, which is really important for this Optiplex motherboard because there are no additional fan headers and certainly no standard fan headers that you could plug a normal fan into. So having these guys here that run on their own fan controller, just needing a SATA power plug to run, that is excellent. The RGB elements are controlled with a button on the front panel, so all is good with those front fans. The other thing I like here is a little bit less of a big deal because you could always just remove a fan, but the rear exhaust fan area is completely vacant out of the box, which allows me to use the original Optiplex fan. And even though the mounting holes don't align with this case, it is possible to get a couple of screws in there to mount the fan securely. So all is good there, and that's one of the big deals because you need that back fan to avoid one of the errors from this motherboard. Speaking of the motherboard, it is nice to see with these older Optiplexes, and this is not just the Haswell generation ones either, but these mini towers that Dell had use completely standard micro ATX motherboards, so they do mount perfectly into a chassis like this. You don't necessarily have to do any case mod whatsoever to get them to mount into this chassis. And in fact, the rear I/O panel from the Optiplex system pops out just like a standard run-of-the-mill motherboard's I/O panel would, or rather I/O shield. So you can just mount the motherboard in this chassis exactly as you normally would. The only thing proprietary on the motherboard are some of the headers, which you can get around with some basic circuit jumpers, which I will link the ones that I used in the description down below because they work just fine. And once you have the appropriate headers jumped, then you're good to go. And again, if you're looking for a tutorial, actually just take a look at TechYesCity's video. It covers everything you need to know with that and gets you up and running with a system like this. This is just basically the proof of concept. And yeah, once the motherboard was in, the only sensor I had to carry over was the front panel air temperature sensor that comes out of the Dell Optiplex, which I just tucked away into the power supply basement just to get it out of the way. But it is there to prevent any sort of error code being triggered by the lack of sensor there. The intrusion sensor can actually be disabled completely in the BIOS and then removed altogether, which is why it's not in this system either. The speaker does not actually cause an error message when it's disconnected, so that speaker that's mounted in the Optiplex systems is also not present in this rig. So really the only things I had to carry over was that air temperature sensor and then that rear fan. Though this transplant was not perfect, and that's because the front panel USB Type-C port doesn't work, as well as the front panel audio does not work, and that's just because I did not have a sound card that had a front panel audio header mounted on the sound card itself to plug the front panel sound into. So on this particular configuration, the front panel sound does not work. And then the Type-C port doesn't work because, well, this motherboard is existed since, before front panel Type-C was a thing. So it doesn't work. On the bright side, the USB 3.0 ports do work just fine because this motherboard does have a USB 3.0 header, and it actually also even has a USB 2.0 header in case you have a case that has one of those instead of these USB 3 ports. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about cost with this system because doing this is not free, and I definitely didn't pick the cheapest case. The number one reason though to do this from a practicality standpoint isn't aesthetics, it's actually the performance of the system, especially if you're planning to put a GPU into this system. Getting this better airflow from a case like this is going to be essential to keeping your GPUs cool, because frankly, the Optiplex systems have terrible airflow. But even beyond that, if you are looking for aesthetics, this is a very easy way, and somewhat cheap way I might add, to get a system that is very inexpensive with the Optiplex based platform and then put it into a case that actually looks really nice, which frankly I think this one actually looks really nice. I really like the looks of this case. And then if you're trying to flip the systems, doing this may actually be necessary to get a little bit more money back out of the system, because these Optiplex systems are everywhere and everyone knows it, and the process for actually upgrading them into a gaming rig is super easy, to the point where there's really not much of a point to buying an Optiplex gaming system that's already been converted to a gaming system. To be honest, a lot of people are probably going to look at the ease of which you can get an Optiplex system and turn it into a gaming system and just do it themselves. But when you're recasing a system like this, it may require just enough know-how that somebody that may feel comfortable adding a graphics card to a system looks at this and goes, I'm just going to pay somebody a little bit of money to get it done already for me. And that's where a system like this may come into play when you're somebody trying to flip systems. Now, in regard to the specific costs of this system, here's what I have going on here. This case cost me a little over $70 when I bought it, which you can check the links for current availability and pricing, because I know Musatex cases do tend to fluctuate quite a bit in their pricing. The power supply adapter to take my 450 watt EVGA 24-pin ATX connector down to the connector that is required for this motherboard was something like $10. Absolutely not overly expensive for that thing. And then the power supply itself, you can find a power supply, whether you're going through EVGA's B-Stock website or even sometimes on Amazon, for about $30. That's going to get you a 450 or 500 watt power supply that's going to be good enough to power a solid gaming GPU that'll pair nicely with an i7-4790. So all told, this mod is probably going to cost you a little over $100, give or take, depending on what case you're going with, what power supply you go with, and that sort of thing. And then it's just a matter of picking out a GPU to go into the system. Now, right now, this has a 750 Ti, but frankly, a 4790 would actually pair better, in my mind, with something like a GTX 1060 or an RX 480 or a 580. I think that would be a really nice CPU GPU pairing for a system like this. And now that I actually have a case here that looks really good and can definitely accommodate a more powerful GPU without worrying about it overheating, I might go out of my way and actually try to find a used GPU that pairs a little bit better with the 4790. But that wraps up the story of this Optiplex 9020 going from being a standard run-of-the-mill office surplus PC over to being something that you could legitimately call an entry-level gaming PC with a nice little GPU upgrade path, because the power supply does support GPUs that are going to be much more powerful than a 750 Ti. But with that, I do want to hear from you guys. Is this a process that you would be interested in doing for yourself and getting yourself onto the PC gaming side of gaming in general, maybe moving away from consoles? Or is this something that you would just generally say is kind of cool, but at the same time you'd rather stick with consoles, or maybe just buy a brand new pre-built gaming PC? Let me know all your thoughts about that in those comments down below. And of course, if you like the video, give it a like, share, subscribe, comment. All those things are very helpful for the channel. You can follow me both on Instagram and on Twitter at Hoosier Hardware. And as always, I'll let YouTube queue up a couple more videos from my channel for you to watch. I'm Shane with Hoosier Hardware, and I'll see you guys in the next video.